All right, let's get started. We actually, just before we begin, this is a very introductory course. This is to introduce you to Colonial One at GW. So if you've run jobs on Colonial One before, you probably aren't going to learn anything today. So if you leave, we won't be offended. Like you had way more advanced questions than anything we're going to cover today. These are the basics. This is like what Colonial One is, how the architecture works, how you log in, how you copy files up to it, and then if we are very, very lucky, at the very end of this course, we will do a simple job submission script. We'll run one minor job. And then the course next week is all about job management, virtual environments for Python and R, and Bash scripting. So if you think you're more advanced, or if you've read through the slides and you're like, this isn't for me, that's fine. What we're going to cover today, the first part is very basic. We're going to go over who to contact for help, because a lot of users don't know it. The onboarding process. Where am I getting feedback from? The onboarding process, in case you want to invite other people to use Colonial One. This is a university-wide cluster. It's not limited to a particular school or research group. It's actually up to each entity that has kicked in money to support Colonial One to say yay or nay. So we'll go over who's allowed to use it, who's not. We will log in first before we go over the cluster architecture, so we can show you where you're at in the cluster. Then we're going to go over cluster architecture very briefly. It's just a couple of pictures. Navigating the shell. This is a basic 2-slide review of Linux command line, just enough so you can complete the rest of the exercises today. If there's anybody here who's not particularly knowledgeable, or you don't have a lot of experience with Linux, SEAS does have a Linux workshop. We've already offered it for this semester, but I can email you the slides after the class if you come see me. Then we're going to do modules, environment variables, and dot profile. This is just how to customize the shell. We will go over quota policies on Colonial One, which are fairly lenient as far as clusters go. Actually, I would say exceptionally lenient. Most universities and research institutions have hard quotas, and we don't. The purge policy, and the hardest part of this class, at least from an organizational standpoint, is file transfer and management. So if we get to this point, it's like a 10-step or a 10-slide process, and you get lost, feel free to just stop and read through the slides later, because it's needlessly complicated. After that, we'll do lost versus NFS file systems, and that's more information. And then hopefully we make it all the way to the end. Slurm is the job manager for Colonial One. We are going to write a very, very simple submit script, and then we are going to submit it to Colonial One. All it's going to do is create a file in your home directory, and then email you when the job is done. If we get through all that today, that's fantastic. Are there any questions before we begin? All right, let's dig in. The most important thing, when you're starting out with Colonial One, if you have any questions whatsoever, hpchealp@gwu.edu. This should have been in your welcome email. This is the primary Colonial One mailing list. You can email anything your heart desires to that email address. There are no stupid questions. We answer the same questions hundreds of times in a row. We don't care. There are about 13 people that monitor that list at all hours of the day. You will usually get a response within an hour, unless you email at like 4 a.m. on a Sunday. Any question, if you need software install, email it to HPC Help. If your job doesn't run, email it to HPC Help. If you can't access Colonial One, email HPC Help. To go over the structure of the Colonial One support team, individual schools have actually paid into a central fund to buy the university-wide cluster. So like the School of Engineering coughed up some money. The Columbian College actually coughed up more money than anybody else. The School of Medicine and Public Health, the School of Public Health Sciences, Computational Biology Institute, and then DIT, which is the central division of IT. They've actually contributed some of their own money. All of the people here get a copy of every email that's sent to HPC Help. So just ask us a question. Like I don't know anything about R, but Glenn McLaughlin, who works in CCAS, is at an expert level on it. So if you got a question about R, even if you're in the School of Engineering, send it to the email list, and odds are Glenn's going to answer the question. Does that make sense? Don't don't discredit the mailing list, because even if the mailing list isn't technically the right place for you to get a solution, we can probably direct you to where you need to go. And actually, I should introduce people. My name is Jason Hurlbert. I'm the Assistant Director of the SEAS Computing Facility, and we have various helpers around the room. So my colleague Marco Suarez is standing back there in the corner. Over here we have Monica Ragucci, who's a colleague of mine. Next to her is Terrence Lewis, who works as a junior systems engineer, or actually just a systems engineer for DIT. And who else do we have? Who else is here to help? Is that it? Joe. Yeah, Joe. And Joseph with the School of Public Health. So any of these people, if you get stuck at any point during these exercises or you have a question, raise your hand. If I can't answer it, they'll come around. We're going to log in just about 30 seconds, and that's the first point people get tripped up. So just raise your hand, somebody will come see you. So that's HPC getting help. It's by far the most important, because if you know how to do this, you'll learn how to do everything else. As far as the onboarding procedure, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody in this room should have gone through something kind of like this. You request a Colonial One account on the description of the workshop email, whichever email you got. It had this link. You fill out the form. The only tricky part about the form is, at least for the School of Engineering, you do not need a PI or a faculty sponsor to actually get onto Colonial One. You can be an undergrad student and we will give you access. So if you just want to play around with the cluster, you can have an account. So when you're filling out that form, if you don't have a PI, just say, I don't have a PI, and we'll know what to do with it. Once you fill out the form, we create your account. We give you a home directory. We assign a group to you. If you don't have a faculty sponsor, your group is actually called No PI. A lot of you, a little bit later when you log in, we'll find out you're in the No PI group. Maybe not a lot of you, a few of you. You receive the welcome email, and then you're ready to go. Once your account is created, you can log in, and Colonial One is your oyster. The local support partner, and this is where it actually gets a little bit tricky, the local support partner can provide individualized support if you have a local support partner. And I don't recognize a lot of people in this room, so I don't know what schools you're from, but that would go back here. If you're in Columbian College, like they have the Office of OTS, if you're in SEAS, we have the SEAS Computing Facility. If you're in the School of Medicine and Public Health, DOTSIEN's group, I don't know if they have an acronym. But if you know who to go to within your individual department for support, that's where you're going to go for support after your Colonial One account is created, for individualized support. But again, you can always send an email to HPC Help. And then continued support, again, is provided via the email list. We keep mentioning that because it's very important. We want everybody to know about that email. Okay, so now we're going to try and log everybody in. And this is deliberately vague because sometimes people bring their own laptops. But to log into Colonial One, you need an account and an SSH client. Is there anybody here who does not know what an SSH client is? Or hasn't heard the term? Everybody's familiar with SSH. All right, so I'm going to, you don't know? All right, Marco, please assist. And I am actually, don't put it next to that microphone. If you're logged into one of the Windows machines in this lab, you can use your NetID and password to log in. And there is a program, it's a terrible name, it's called MOBA Xterm. It is a fantastic program. It has an awful name. Look for it. And go ahead and launch it. Otherwise, if you're familiar with SSH, launch whatever your SSH client is. I'll be doing this demo with MOBA Xterm because I'm on a Windows machine, but we'll wait. But shortly I'll be able to show everybody where we should be. So when we SSH the remote host, is, oops, forgot something. Okay, so your remote host for Colonial One, it's going to be login, it's hard to see, but login.colonial1.gwu.edu. That's the DNS address of the login nodes for Colonial One. So that's what you point your SSH client to. Your username is your NetID. If you're not on a Windows machine, you're probably not going to have to specify a port, but if you need to, the port is 22. Hit OK. asks for your password. Yeah, sure. All right, give me a second. I need to zoom. Zoom. Okay, so is everybody here? Raise your hand if you're not here. I know it's at the bottom of the screen and it's kind of hard to see, but you should be at a prompt of some sort. It may not look exactly like mine, but it should be. Oh, are you in?
Yeah.
Oh. It's sorry, it's login.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, that part's right.
All right. So I'm going to clear the screen here.
It says host design. Oh, you have a colon. Was it? It's not a colon, right?
No, it's not a colon, it's a dot.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Oh, this is hard to see. Is that?
Can you show me that?
Oh, yeah, I'm not pushing.
Again, because this is telling me it doesn't.
So clear.
Oh, wait. Never mind. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't log in, but you're logged in.
Okay, so is everybody here? If your screen is full and you'd like to clean it up, you can just type clear, just like that. And that should erase everything and bring your prompts back up to the top of the screen. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'd like everybody to type in PWD, which is just short for Print Working Directory. And it should be reading, if this worked correctly, home/whatever your net ID is. Does that look good for everybody? All right.
No,
What do you mean, no?
that's not what I did. I give a little bit extra.
I'll have Monica. He's not actually connected.
No, actually, that's not
All right, so if we've logged in for the most part, we're gonna move on to the architecture of the cluster. Leave this window open. Go ahead and play around if you'd like. We've just got a couple of slides about how the cluster is set up. And before we go back to the slides, you don't have to run this command, but I'm going to run a command called hostname. Colonial One, we are on, and if you guys just type hostname, all one word, it will show you the name of the machine that we're on. And so right now I'm logged into login 4. Some of you may be logged into login 3. We have 2 login nodes. So when you interface with a cluster, a login node is the gateway between the part of the cluster that does the work and the outside world. So you only ever really interact with a login node. You don't go bouncing around the rest of the cluster. There are almost 300 servers in the cluster. Most of you will never ever work directly on any of them. You work directly on a login node. So I just wanted to take note of that. So as we come up here, the architecture. This is a picture of part of the cluster. It is not huge. It's 7 racks, and then we have an expansion that's 3 racks. So Colonial One, as it stands, the old cluster, is 10 racks. We have a new cluster that should be coming online, hopefully January. That's an additional 14 racks. I do not have a picture of that yet because it's not quite up and running. Yes, sir?
Where is it?
This is in our Virginia campus data center. If anybody would like a tour of Colonial One, you want to go out to the Virginia campus, I live out there. I will gladly drag you through the data center and show you all there is to see, which is pretty much just this. I mean, there are cabinets, there are a lot of pretty lights. It is in Enterprise Hall. I don't know how familiar any of you are with the Virginia campus, but there's Exploration Hall, Enterprise Hall, Innovation Hall, and a new building. I don't know the name of it. This is technically in the basement or first floor of Enterprise Hall. It's in a GW-owned data center. I'm not going to read through all these, but we're up to 262 nodes. So a node is a full server. So, and not like a desktop computer, like they are actually Dell servers. Like each node has at least 12 cores. Most of them have 16. I want to say 30 to 35% have GPUs if you need to do machine learning or anything like that. The older version of the cluster, we have the NVIDIA K20, the Kepler GPUs, which at this point are about 5 years old. They're kind of good, but the expansion, they have the 12 gig P100s, which are really, really good. They came out about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. We've got totals. You can read through these. We've got over 33 terabytes of RAM total. That's almost a meaningless statistic because it's not like you can run a job with 33 terabytes of RAM because it doesn't exist on any one single machine. The back end is Mellanox FDR InfiniBand Fabric. If anybody cares, it's very, very low latency, and it runs at about 54 gigabits per second. To give you an idea of speed, a regular desktop computer, the hard drive, even a fast hard drive, maxes out at 6 gigabits a second. So these machines actually talk to each other faster than the computer you're sitting in front of can talk to its own hard drive. We've got 2 primary file systems, which is Lustre and NFS, and we will address that later when we're going over policies about where you should run jobs. This is honestly just more of a show-off slide for people that need to spend money to support Colonial One. We've got over 1,000 users. It's been growing steadily over the past 4. I've been working with it for about 4 years. It's been growing steadily over 4 years. The School of Engineering, when we started, we had 11 people on Colonial One, and now we have over 140, I think. So, and it's been like that for other schools within the university. Over 2,000 jobs every day is almost a meaningless statistic because that does include jobs that don't finish. That also includes jobs that fail immediately. Like I would say 10% of our jobs maybe that run, never do anything. Because of a syntax error or something else, they fail right off the bat. The nice thing about the scheduler, though, when we get into the scheduler, is our demand is always somewhere in the low 90%, which means that every single machine in that cluster is being used almost to its fullest potential. And that is entirely because of the scheduler. That's because of Slurm. So when you submit a job, you submit it to the scheduler, and the scheduler looks at your priority, looks at a bunch of different variables, but most importantly, it looks for empty spots in the cluster where it can run your job. So if somebody's running a job for 2 weeks, and then somebody else wants to run a job for 2 weeks, but the scheduler knows that your job is going to finish in 30 minutes, and it finds a gap, then it will just go ahead and plug your job in, and it makes it really, really efficient. So people tend to complain, well, I shouldn't say complain, people tend to be disappointed that they have to wait for their job to start, but if we didn't have a scheduler, you would wait months for your job to start because everything would be sequential. You'd have to wait for the first guy, and then the second guy, and then the third guy, whereas with the scheduler, sometimes you can skip the line. Sometimes if you have a short job, it'll just go ahead and plug your job in. Open to the entire GW community, and as of last year, we had 129 open proposals for funding that reference Colonial One, so quoted in papers. Jobs run on Colonial One. You guys can read through this because honestly, I'm not familiar with most of these groups except the genomic sequencing people. It's just to give you a general idea. It's a general purpose cluster. So some clusters are very high throughput. They're made for like high frequency calculations and very little disk I/O. Some clusters are very high disk I/O and lower number of calculations. We are pretty much middle of the road. If you'd like to do something on Colonial One, odds are we can make it work. We might not make it work as well as a specialized cluster would make it work, but that's the trade-off. Also, you don't have to pay anything for it. It's already paid for, so that's nice. So we already went through login nodes, which is what you're logged into. We briefly touched on the scheduler. Does everybody, and it'll make more sense towards the end of this, but does everybody kind of get the idea of a scheduler? Is anybody not familiar with the concept of a scheduler? It's like a calendaring system for your jobs. That's pretty much it. And then the compute nodes. The compute nodes are just the servers that do all the work. And we have a very nice picture of it coming up. We've got login 3, login 4. On the old cluster, we've got 2 public login nodes. They're not enormous servers, but they're 64 gigs of RAM, 16 cores. They don't have to be that big because you are not supposed to run jobs on login nodes. And we're going to hammer that point home with another graphic in a second. Login 3, login 4. You compile your job, you write your job script, you do whatever, you submit it to Slurm. And then the Slurm scheduling agent does its thing, and then all the way down here on the compute node, Slurm says, okay, you've requested this one node. If you request one node, then Slurm hands a job off to one node, and it says you've got 2 days to run, or 12 hours to run, however much you request for your job. And that's the general like idea of the cluster. So you normally only talk to the top of the cluster. You never actually get down here. Yes.
My question is, where is our home directory?
Oh, we're not at storage yet. It's coming up, but I will show you. Your home directory, it's like 2 slides from now. Your home directory is over here. Your home directory is actually on shared storage that isn't part of this at all. But I'll show you.
Is Slurm a common scheduler?
Slurm is a very common scheduler. It's open source. Its main, I don't want to say the main competitor, but the other big one is PBS Pro. But PBS Pro didn't used to be free. It may be free now. Slurm technically isn't free. Well, Slurm is free. Support for Slurm isn't free. They all work mostly the same. The syntax is very, very similar. Like when I learned about schedulers, I was actually working on a cluster that had PBS Pro, and the Slurm syntax is almost identical. Like it's very easy to switch back and forth. But it is popular, especially for larger enterprise clusters. But I'll be honest, I don't know the history behind it. I just know that you see it everywhere. All right, so we already went over. Don't run jobs on the login node. There are very few things that will get your account locked out of Colonial One, but continuously running jobs on a login node, we will lock you out. And the reason we do that is because since these servers aren't meant to run jobs, if you accidentally run a job there, you lock it up. You can freeze it, and then nobody else can get into the cluster. So it's not just, it's a cascading mistake. Like you are actively blocking the rest of the community from getting their work done. So it's not a matter of like sysadmins being cranky, it's a matter of the entire user community being cranky. So don't run jobs on a login node. And the easiest way not to run a job on a login node is to use Slurm. If you're not running a submit script, then odds are you're probably running a job on one of the login nodes. Run the jobs on the compute node. Okay, so who had a question about storage? You had a question about storage. Now, storage in Colonial One is a little different. It's a shared storage network. So storage, your home directories, your group directories, and Lustre, and we'll go over what they all are. All of the data on Colonial One that you use for your jobs doesn't actually exist here, 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 or here. It exists over here. It exists on an entirely separate set of servers. And we have 2 entirely separate set of servers. The first one holds home and group, and this is your home directory, this is your group directory. This is slower storage. This is meant for data results. If you run a job, you get a lot of data, you manipulate it, but then your final result is smaller. So like, let's say you run a job that generates 20 terabytes of data, but your final work product is only 1 terabyte. You would store your final work product on home and group. The rest of the data that you use for your job, you're going to store on Lustre. And for people who aren't familiar with Lustre or you've never heard the term, it is an extremely high-speed, very low latency parallel file system. It's meant for high-speed writes, high-speed reads, and generating like millions of files at a time. If you run a job on your home directory, we will lock your account. Now the reason we do that is because this storage is so slow, you can shut down the cluster for everybody else. But we'll go over this a little bit later. But home and group and Lustre, all of your storage is on an entirely separate set of servers, and is communicated over via network, via InfiniBand. So it doesn't actually exist. It shows up as a mount, but it doesn't actually exist on any of these servers that you're running your jobs on. Does that make sense? All right, so we're all clear? All right. So good. Yeah, the second slide. I'm just saying run your jobs on Lustre. Store your data on home and group, but run your jobs on Lustre because Lustre is designed for it. NFS is not. Somebody in this room eventually is going to make this mistake, and it's not necessarily your fault, especially as jobs get bigger. It becomes difficult to figure out where you're reading and writing from. So somebody is going to bring down the entire cluster, and you'll feel very, very bad about it, and we'll chase you down. But just to start, always keep it rolling around in the back of your head. If you're running the job and it's only going to write out like 10 megabytes of stuff, yeah, then maybe you can run it against your home directory. If it's going to write out 10 terabytes of data, run it against Lustre, because Lustre is the only, all of the infrastructure is designed to handle that load, whereas your home and group is not. Home and group is meant for mainly slow storage. I don't want to call it archival data, but the data that doesn't change that quickly. All right, so we're going to do a brief navigating through the shell for people who aren't familiar with Linux, like a refresher. And I'm actually going to have to do this with 2 monitors because we're going to get off the slides and go back to the terminal so we can have you guys do some work. So if we're here, we've already done PWD. Everybody should be in your home directory. Please just make sure that you're in your home directory. We go over absolute and relative paths mainly to stress when you're writing a script, it is always better to, is everybody familiar with absolute versus relative paths? Like, I mean, I can show you an example. If I'm in my home directory, there's a ton of garbage in it. But anything here in blue is a directory. So like, let's say tech-plot. Say I want to move to the tech-plot directory. Clear. I'll do cd tech-plot. You guys don't have a tech-plot directory. cd tech-plot. This is what we call a relative move. I'm in my home directory. I'm going to move 1 directory deeper. I'm going to move into the tech-plot directory. So I do cd tech-plot, and then I do pwd. pwd actually shows my absolute path. So I'm actually in home Hurlburt tech-plot. So that is my absolute path. Either one is valid. Well, the reason we pointed out is when you're writing a script, the system isn't always going to know. You could be like, oh, it's in my home directory, and I call it all the time because I'm sitting in my home directory, so it makes sense. So if I go like to the root of the file system, and I do cd tech-plot, tech-plot doesn't exist. So when you're writing your script, make life easy on you and us, and use absolute paths, which is just that big, long, just whatever the absolute path is. As long as we've driven that concept home, we should be good to go.
If I create a soft link for a directory in the Lustre, but and I head into that directory, and tap pwd, but it just shows me the soft link, but not the absolute directory.
It doesn't follow the link.
It follows link, but does not give me an absolute directory. It should give me dash Lustre and something. Actually, it gives me my home directory dash the soft link.
Okay, so it's giving you the path of the soft link?
Yes.
Okay, there should be a switch in PWD to give you, to follow the link, to let you know, to do exactly what this says, to follow the link, to go to where the link points. I do not know it off the top of my head. We can talk about it after class. Who knows the difference if you go to your home directory, clear, everybody type ls minus la. My apologies, I've got a lot of stuff in my directory, so hey, test 2. Who knows the difference between dot and dot dot in Linux? What's the answer?
That's your current directory, dot dot's the one above you.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Dot is your current directory. Dot is the directory you're in. So it is just a representation. If you do cd space dot, it doesn't change the directory. It says go to exactly where I'm at right now. Dot dot is 1 directory up. That's it. So if you get inside a directory and you're like, how do I get out? It's just cd space dot dot. Dot dot is always up. So you can do neat little things like dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot slash. It'll keep track. That's not going to bring me up 1 directory. It's going to bring me up 3. So I should be right now home something before I run that. All right, so I'm in home Herbert J. Yeah, this should take me to root. So I'm going up 3. So if I do cd dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot slash, dot dot slash, erase that one, dot dot slash, erase that one, and then the third dot dot slash, erase home. And this should bring me back to the root of the file system. If I do pwd, boom, I'm at the root of the file system. That's it. It's just something to keep in mind. You can make these calls while you're working on the shell. You can make these calls from within a script, but again, that's a relative call, so you have to be very, very careful. Well, I mean, it can screw up your script. Just be careful. That's really all we care about. Everybody already ran ls, so we're good with that. We're good with CD. That is just the very, very brief overview. As long as we have relative and absolute paths, we're fine. And now we're going to go to the first exercise, which honestly for this group should be very, very easy. Oh, what's the tilde? What's the little above the other character I don't know the name for?
The home?
Yep, it's a shortcut for your home directory. And again, you can call it from anywhere. So if you do cd space tilde, no matter where you are in the file system, that will bring you back to your home directory. So we'd like everybody to go cd tilde, make sure you're in your home directory. I can't leave both of these up at the same time. All right, I'm going to leave the slide up. And raise your hand if you get stuck. The second command is nano space testfile.txt. Who knows what nano is? Text editor. It is an easy text editor. We're not using VI in this class because I feel like going home this weekend. So just type nano text file. It will take you into a text editor and add some text. All we want to do is create a text file. So after you hit enter after nano test file, everybody make it into nano. I promise you there won't be a lot of typing. This is the most typing you'll have to do for any exercise. And after step 3, can everybody just take a brief break? Because I'd like to go over what we're going to do for the second part. So just let me know when you have your text file created. Got it. For the people who've created your text file, say you want to see the text file, but you don't want to go back into nano. What command could you use? Does anybody know? Less, more, or cat. And cat is short for concatenate, I think. But catalog? I thought it was concatenate. Anyway, less and more tend to be favored. Less because cat just spits the entire contents of the file out. Less and more will do it by page. Less, you can actually use the arrow keys, so less tends to be the utility that most people use. All right, so if we're all at step 3, I'm going to run through this real quick. Can you guys see that? All right, so if I run, what am I doing here? When I do cd tilde / JSON test2, where is that going to put me? But exactly where? In which directory? In JSON test2 under?
Oh, your home.
Yeah. So this is a shortcut, but it is an absolute command. It's a shortcut that says take me to my home directory, then take me to JSON test2, which I'm doing because it's an empty directory, and then I will do nano test file.txt, get caught up with you guys. Test. Hello. Control X. We're back out. Now we need everybody to type make dir, just make directory, and we're going to make a directory called test dir. After that, everyone run ls -la test star. And again, if you're familiar with Linux, this should be incredibly basic. This is going to show us, if we do ls-la test, it's going to show us anything that starts with the word test, and then anything after it. We've got test file, we've got the test directory. Now notice there's nothing in test directory at the moment, but there's about to be. Type mv, and again, in Linux, be very careful because the move command, there's no confirmation, it just happens. So if you accidentally move files to where you're not expecting, or you move files, and even worse, overwrite files with the same name, you can lose a lot of data very, very quickly. But in this case, we're going to move testfile.txt. It's going to type move testfile.txt to tester to move it into the directory, just to give you an idea. And if we run ls-la test again, all right, so it's here. We run ls-la again. Before, that file was in our actual directory, and now it should be listed as under, am I in the wrong directory?
No, it does that.
It does that.
Seriously? Hang on. Why would it do that? Am I missing something here? Marco? Huh. All right, let's try this. I'll be honest, I don't know why that's happening. Because it shouldn't. We've moved the text file under testdir. So ls is reporting back correctly. ls-la is reporting back correctly. But if I use a wildcard, it is not giving me. But I'm not. I'm not. So.
It's doing the same thing with me.
Yeah. All right. So it's thankfully doing the same thing with everybody. I'm going to have to look into this. The whole point of the exercise was just to get the file inside that folder. It's inside that folder. I don't know why it is presenting, when we do a wildcard, why it is presenting directory. At some point, there should be a header that says, this is the file inside this directory, and it's not doing that. I don't know why. Yeah, still not doing it. All right, it's behavior I was unfamiliar with. All right, and then at the end, just to make sure that we're back in your home directory, please everybody type cd tilde. And then that's the end of the very, very, very brief navigating the shell review. Does anybody have any questions? We only included, because some years there are some people who've never logged into a Linux machine before. You guys look pretty comfortable. Go ahead and move on. All right, modules. How many people have worked with modules before? How many people know what modules are? Anybody? Modules are a little bit tricky because it's almost like loading a program on Colonial One, except it's not loading a program on Colonial One. What modules do is they configure your environment. They configure your system variables, like your path variable and everything else, to point to programs that are installed elsewhere on Colonial One. So you can think of modules like loading a program, but that's not actually what they do. But long story short, but modules are your friend. Like if you want to run MATLAB on Colonial One, you have to load a MATLAB module. If you want to run a different version of Python, here, I'll show you. Colonial One, because it is so old, not a bad thing, been very reliable over the years. But Colonial One is old. It runs a very old version of Red Hat 6.7 or CentOS 6.7. And so the built-in Python for the system is very old because Red Hat never updates Python for the operating system. It's what makes Red Hat very stable over the years, but if you're a researcher, like this version of Python is 100 years old, even though it says it was updated July 23rd, 2015, it probably came out 10 years ago. It is unacceptable for almost everybody, or at least anybody who wants to use like new libraries, like you want to run TensorFlow or machine learning or anything else. This version of Python isn't going to work. This is where modules come in. Modules let you configure Colonial One however you like. So I'm going to go back to the slides, but quit Python. And we'll just go over module commands. This is just a reference slide, but pretty basic. Module list will actually list modules that are loaded. Module list, oops, everybody goes to their console. When you log into Colonial One, if you don't configure your environment to auto-load any modules, the only module you should see loaded is Slurm, and that is Slurm, the scheduling agent. That's so you can actually submit jobs to Colonial One. We automatically add that to your environment when you log in. Sorry, so did everybody get that? It's module list.
GCC too.
Oh, do you have GCC? I may have taken.
Do some of us just have like C on ours?
No. Actually, I may have taken C out of mine. GCC may be a default. Is it? Okay. Then I took it out of my environment a while ago. I'm sorry. I've been on Colonial One for a long time. I'm sure I took it out for a good reason. All right. So correction. If you're a new user, you'll see Slurm in GCC. And actually, GCC is loaded just so you can compile programs right off the bat. We do have different versions of GCC in modules. So you can overwrite. If you don't like the version that comes with Red Hat, you can use the different one. So we've got module list, we've got module avail. Module avail, this may take a while because this is going to list every module that we have available on Colonial One, and I think we're pretty close to 400 at this point. So if you're like, wow, I wish this program was installed on Colonial One, run module avail and run through the list and see if you can find it. It's probably already there, but if it's not, send an email to HPC help and say, let's get on the ball, guys. I need you to install this program. As you can see, we've got multiple versions of MATLAB. You can go all the way back to 2013, it looks like. And we're up to 2017, which means we probably should build a 2018 package. We're just a little bit behind the ball. But when you load a module, like let me just do a for example. I'm going to quit out of this. You can hit Q to get out of the module list if you'd like. I'm going to load, like before we ran Python 266. Actually, I don't know. So we're at Python 266, so I'll do like module load Python. Actually, let's just do 276. So all I've done is I've loaded Python 276 because I like 266 is too old. I need one incremental version newer, and now if I run Python, it will actually say, oh, it's Python 276. That's all modules do. And you can do that with any module that is in that module avail list, provided that module still works. Some of them we installed years ago, they may be broken, but that's the general idea. Once you've loaded a module, you can always do module list. It's very easy to get confused, especially if you've got a Python script and you've got to load like six different versions of Python before you find one that works. You run module list and you say, I don't want that Python anymore. Module. Unload Python. Module list. Okay, and I've gotten rid of the Python module that I don't want. That's all you have to do. You can load as many modules as you want. Do be cognizant of the fact that you can load modules that may conflict with each other. Like if you try and load two versions of GCC at the same time, obviously you're going to have a problem. You try and load two versions of Python at the same time, it's going to call one or the other, but it's not going to call both. So just try and keep track of what you have loaded. Module spider is the only other command I wanted to go through. And module spider is just module search. It's like return any modules that have this word in the name or the description. So we could do module spider Python. And it gives you, if you're looking for something and you don't see a module that's actually called exactly what you're looking for, try Spider, and maybe it's attached to a different module. Yes?
If there are multiple versions and you just type without the version number, does it automatically load the latest one?
By default, that's how we try and set it up. So you'll see Python current. If you don't type a version number, it's going to load Python current, which usually, but not necessarily always, because we are the people that have to do this, will point to the most recent version. But don't assume. It is always, especially when you're writing a submit script or a job, be explicit about the version you want to use. Because what happens, especially what's happened on Colonial One, is people who've been on Colonial One for 5 years. I started module load Python, and then we updated Python, and then nothing worked. Or they went back to an old script that was 3 years old, and module load Python doesn't work anymore because now they need to load module load Python 2.7.6 instead of 3.4.2. So if you have a job that is working, being specific is always the best option. Like try and be really, really anal about it. Because it will break down the road. You won't remember why. We won't be able to figure it out, and you may have to redo your work. So we've got a module exercise that is pretty close to what I just did, except we're going to do it with R. And you guys should be able to do this because very little typing. Go ahead and just type a capital R in the command line. And it should not work. If this works, before you've started this exercise, let me know. Because R should not be loaded. You should get command not found. You should get an error message of some sort. So did everybody get the R console to load? Towards the end of it, it all works. So we understand that. We'll go into a little bit more detail when we get into environment variables about how a module actually changes your environment. But that's the basics. Modules are your friend. You're going to add them to your submit scripts, either for Python or even more complicated programs, or free utilities that you found on the web that you would like to install on Colonial One. Next week, we will actually go over very briefly about how to install software in your own home directory so you don't even have to ask us. As long as you can compile something in your own home directory, have at it. We don't really, don't run a web server, we'll shut it down. But anything else, we're good to go. Okay, so environment variables, we include environment variables because I'd say easily 60% of the reasons, 60% of the time jobs don't run, it is because either a path variable is messed up or like LD library path or your GCC path. It is an environment variable related. Does anybody know what an environment variable is? Because I'm going to show you your environment variable.
It's a variable that you set that tells where to go looking for stuff.
Exactly. It is a variable you set in your shell that tells the computer where to go looking for stuff. The most popular environment variable by far is called path. Or if you're going to print it, let's do that. I'll show you the path variable. Oops. Back. Quit clear. So everybody just type echo $path. Yours may look a little bit different, but it should be on point because I don't think I've actually edited my path variable that much. Who knows what the path is for?
Bin commands, executing.
Exactly, executables. So like if you type executables are really anything else. Path is a global access. So think of it as a variable that your shell looks at whenever you type a word. Like if I type, let's say I type Kepler, which is not a command, I hope not. No, not a command, all right. So I type the word Kepler. Linux is going to assume that that's a command that I'm trying to run, but it is only going to look in the directories that are specified in my path variable, in my path environment variable. So user lib64, qt33 bin. Anywhere you see a colon, that's the start of a new directory. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 15 different directories. If you see command not found and you know that the software is installed, then your path variable is messed up. Like Linux or your shell doesn't know where to go to find that command. So like command not found, immediately assume either the software isn't installed or if you know the software is installed, it is a problem with this variable. If you want to look at all of your environment variables, you can actually type print env. And for me, this is going to spit out a long list of things. It should actually spit out a fairly long list of variables for you guys. And I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm actually not going to go through most of them, but we can point out a couple. We can point out a couple that are of note, like shell. We should, unless you've changed it, most of us should be by default in the bash shell. I would stick with that. There are users that like using the corn shell or the C shell. It is perfectly valid if you want to use that, but understand you're going to be on your own. Like, not on your own compared to like, you can still ask the internet for help, but most people at GW do not use the corn shell or the C shell. So if you need specific help, it's going to be very difficult to support you if you run into a bug or a feature that is only offered in a different kind of shell. So like our shell variable is bash. We've got lmod default module path. So this is actually for our module files. This is where it goes to look for our specific module files. When you do module avail, it's calling this variable. It's saying, give me a list of all the files inside this directory. Yeah, we don't care about that. Who remembers, if I can find it, who remembers the pwd command? Print working directory. Print working directory is a utility and an environment variable. The utility calls the environment variable. It's right there, my working directory, home, overj, JSON test 2. So just neat little things like that. When you get farther into Colonial One, if you get an error message and it's path related, check your environment and see if there's a variable in there that's pointing someplace incorrect. You know, maybe you've compiled something in your home directory and it comes back and it says, well, I looked in user sbin and it's not there. Because you know it's in your home directory, then you can actually change the variable, whatever the variable is, with the export command. You could do, oops, there. You can do export variable equals, and then overj, mine, whatever. But don't do this, because it'll set a bogus variable. But with the export command, it's just export variable name equals, and then whatever you want that variable to be. It could be a file location, it could be a name of a file, it could be like command line arguments for a compiler. We'll get farther into it. We will not get into it in this workshop, but I think that's it for environment variables. There's an exercise for environment variables
that will go away when you log off or not.
Yes, if you export a variable only on the command line, it will disappear. When I will show you when we get to the bash rc and the .profiles, the files that you can actually put commands in files inside your home directory to save settings from session to session. So that export command that I just ran, that disappears when you log off. It's transient, it's a temporary variable. But for the environment variable exercise, do split screens. We've already done echo path, but you can go ahead and do it again if you'd like. And then I'd like everybody to type module load python /342. And the only reason we're doing this exercise is to show you what a module actually does. And in this case, all the module is doing is it is adding a path to the beginning. It's adding a path to the beginning of your path variable. So you load Python 3.4.2 instead of Python 2.6.6. So we're just going to echo the path, load the Python module. We're going to load Python and type 1+1 just for the hell of it. And then we can exit. But the point of the exercise is to notice that that variable has been added. And actually, it adds a few other things. If we had compared, if we did that print environment and exported it to a file, and then did another print environment after we loaded Python and exported it to a file and compared those two files, they'd be slightly different. Like, so the Python module doesn't just change the path variable, it changes a few other variables as well. I don't know exactly what they are. We could look inside the module file to find them. But that's the general idea. This is the extent of the environment variable exercise. And so now, it's an excellent follow-up. As this gentleman pointed out, when we log out, like most of our commands are going to disappear. So what if you want to set something that happens every time you log in, right? Like, I don't know, something to say hello, which is exactly what this is going to do. But like, say you wanted to edit your prompt. You wanted your prompt to always put the path in your prompt. We can set that. You can set environment variables. They are inside files, and this is heavily operating system dependent. Like, since we're on a Red Hat 6.x box, we are going to edit the .bashrc file. But if we were on a Red Hat 7 box, then it's a .bash_profile. If you're on Mac OS now, I guess, I think it's .profile. You have to find the hidden file. But on Colonial One, right now as it stands, it's .bashrc. And so you can walk through this exercise, and I'm going to show you my bashrc file while you're doing that. And remember, it's dot. When you do nano ~/ don't forget the dot. It is a hidden file in Linux. Any file that starts with a period or a dot is hidden, and then --rc. And that should let you edit your bashrc file. ~dot /bashrc. Okay, so I actually have quite a bit in my file. I'm not sure if we want any of this. Don't copy things out of my bashrc. People have done that before. It doesn't end well. These are very specific commands. The umask command, please ignore. My umask command is different from yours if yours is set in your bashrc. That is perfectly fine. Mine is different because I install software for other people on the cluster. You do not. So if you change your umask, it's just going to mess up your file rights as you create files. What's the # mean? Anybody? Comment. So any line in here, you can see there's a lot of them. Any line in here that starts with a # means it's commented out. So I put at some point in the past, I put that command in my file, and I didn't want to delete it, but I didn't want it to be active when I logged in either. So right now there are very few commands that are active, like export PS1, and then this gibberish right here. That sets my prompt. So it's my username @server name, and then a colon, because or a $, because that's the way I like my prompt. I like to know what machine I'm on because I bounce from machine to machine to machine, so it helps to have some reminders. Your exercise is just to add this line, echo, and then hello in double quotes. That's all you have to put. Add that to your .bashrc and then go ahead and save it. How do we save it? In Nano, Control-O. Is everybody familiar with Nano? Do I have to go over that the commands are in the bottom of the screen? Or just briefly, I'm sorry, I forget sometimes people haven't used this. Nano, all the commands are at the bottom. So if you see a little caret figure, that means hold down Control, and then it's going to have a letter next to it, and it'll tell you what the command does. So Control-O saves a file. So you hit Control-O, and then you hit Enter, and it saves it. And if I want to exit, just a little caret, hold down the Control, hit the X, like this, and we'll exit. And we can actually, I think, yeah. We can actually start a new shell session if you all just type the word bash. What that's going to do is open a new bash session, and if this worked, your screen should tell you hello. Everybody got a hello? All right, we're good. This is specifically how to do it on a Red Hat version 6 machine. So if you want to do this on your Apple laptop or your Ubuntu machine, it may be a different hidden file. Just be aware you're probably going to have to Google it. Not the end of the world. All right, so while you guys are playing around with that, we're going to go over quotas. And this is where it gets kind of tricky because we don't have real quotas. We have what are called soft quotas, which means we use them for reporting purposes, but we don't normally police quotas unless somebody gets out of control. So by default, your home directory, you only get 25 gigs. You can request more space if you need it. But start with 25 and figure out if you actually need more than 25 gigs. Because a committee has to approve, well, not a committee, but we have to discuss it. So if you're going to ask for more, have a good reason, we'll discuss it. And we've almost always said yes, unless somebody comes and says we need 200 terabytes, and we just don't have it. Your group quota, if you're part of a research group, by default, you start at 250 gigs. I'll be honest, most of our research groups have moved well beyond this. Most research groups, 250 gigs ends up not being enough. That's fine. Again, you just send an email to HPC help, we get the ball rolling. It does not take that long. But since they are soft quotas, you can blow right past them. And I'm not telling you that so you will blow right past them. I am telling you that because that's a luxury that we have at GW. That's not true elsewhere. Different universities, like University of Maryland, if you get a quota of 50 gigs and you use 50 gigs, you don't get 51. Whereas we will not. We have a soft quota where you will get a warning when you log in that you've exceeded your quota, but we won't kill your job. We're not deleting any data. It's not going to stop your work. And that's specifically why we did that. If we had hard quotas and you filled up your quota, like a job could get killed, you could lose data, and we don't want that to happen. You can actually, from the shell, you can type quota report, and you all, if you are new users, I have a lot of quotas because I'm part of a lot of groups. You may not be, but let's go over people who are, well, Bellaris group. Yeah, hi, Dr. Bellaris. So Dr. Bellaris' group, they've never officially asked for an extension, so their quota is still set at 250 gigs. They're using 4.4 terabytes. Now, as a functional matter, what this means is if we start running out of space on the group's volume, well, this is how we decide who to reach out to. I might reach out to Dr. Bellaris' group and say, hey, you know, you're using 4.4 terabytes, but you've only got a 250 gig quota. Can maybe you delete something? I don't think anybody else is that far. Oh, yeah, Dr. Mann. Dr. Mann, who I believe is in geography, he's over, but he's got a low quota. And then Care for Lang, these guys, I don't know why their quota's not set. That is a glitch. But then some people, like, notice I'm part of the CBI group. Now the CBI group, they have a quota of 55 terabytes. That's a lot of data. And you know what? That much data is not free. Their quota is that big because they paid for it. I don't want you to get the idea in your head that you can send an email to HPC help and say, I would like 55 terabytes for my quota. We will not give it to you. Like when you're asking for that much space, then a discussion has to happen. But the general idea about quotas is we're not, like, we police them, and if you're way over quota, you are first on our list if we run out of space because the group and home volumes do fill up. We're at, actually I can find out right now, 89%. Sorry, that's going to look like garbage on mine because I'm actually, oh, there we go. All right, so it's this line right here. Oh, home is at 89%, which, you know, for a 262 terabyte volume, it is pretty substantial. We're down to 30 terabytes free, and data gets generated so quickly on Colonial One that we could run through that 30 terabytes in less than a day. Like if somebody made a mistake or started writing a lot of data out to Homer Group. So when we have to clear it up, we use quotas. So it's just fair warning for everybody. We don't normally go looking to make people delete stuff until we absolutely have to. That's why we don't have hard quotas. We will give you a hard quota if you give us a reason to, but to my knowledge, nobody's ever given us a reason to in 5 years, so we should be good. So that's quotas. Actually, moving through this pretty quickly. Okay, Luster. Luster gets purged. Luster, who knows what scratch space means within like the quote-unquote research realm? What is scratch space?
You're using it while your program runs and then bye-bye.
Exactly. You're using it while your program runs and then bye-bye. Most clusters, Glenn actually did a lot of work polling other universities and other research institutions. And what do we have, a 60-day policy? Most institutions have a 2-week or 4-week policy where they will automatically delete your data after 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We give you 60 days. So Luster is a very big file system. You can store data on there for 60 days, but at the beginning of every month, we run a script, and it says if that file has been there 60 plus days, get rid of it. Now, we do that because we have to keep Luster clean, and people, Luster is scratch space, so it's meant to be there to run your job. So people are very, very, I want to call them lazy, but people forget to clean up after them. You know, you get your result, and you're like, this is my goal. I'm going to put this in my home directory, and then I'm not going to do any cleanup. And I sympathize with those people because I don't like cleaning anything up either. But so we do it for you. But beware, in Luster, do not plan on storing anything in Luster for longer than 60 days. And we do not really make exceptions at all. The script just runs. We send out an email at the beginning of every month. Or sorry.
2 emails from me.
Yeah, from Terrence. Sorry, Terrence. Describe the process.
Well, pretty much at the beginning of each month, I'll do a query of Luster, get a list of all your groups that are past that 60-day window. I'll send out an email saying these are the files that will get deleted. I usually give you at least 2 weeks. I send out another reminder a week before, and then by close of business, the first business day of the month, I start deleting. So you have until close of business, the first business day of the month, to complete your case why something shouldn't be deleted.
I will cut to the chase. Really, the only valid reason we would give you an exception for the purge is that I started transferring my data 2 weeks ago and it's not done, which occasionally happens. Like sometimes people have like 25 terabytes of data they need to get off Luster, but they need to get it somewhere else that's very slow, like let's say Google Drive. It's incredibly difficult to get 25 terabytes of data up into Google Drive. It is possible, but it takes a long time. So that's a good reason. I just didn't bother with it until yesterday is not a good reason. So if you get the Luster purge email, just be polite. And the reason we do it is because if Luster fills up or NFS and group fill up, the cluster stops. Other people's jobs stop. Luster did actually fill up about 2 years ago. It was inadvertent. Somebody wrote a bad job, but they wrote out 88 terabytes of data in less than 14 hours. And that's an extraordinary amount of data, and we could not delete it fast enough, 1, to stop the job, and 2, to keep the cluster from going down. Because once Luster fills up, everybody else who's trying to write to Luster can't write to Luster, and their jobs fail as well. And so that became, even though it was one job, that became a 3 or 4 day outage just to clean everything up. Because also, it takes a very long time to just delete 88 terabytes, even on a high-speed file system. So we purge it to keep it up. So just beware. Do not use Luster for archival data. It is scratch space for good reason. This is the purge policy. Only reason we include this is for this line. Note, updating access times with the sole intent of circumventing the purging of files will result in account suspension. In a Linux file system, or well, most Unix or Linux-based file systems, you can go to a file and say, all right, well, if the last access time was 61 days ago, change it to 28 days ago. Don't do it. Just don't do it. One, we keep a track of files that should be removed, and so if you're if you end up with files that look like they've been there for a year and we find out, you will get kicked off the cluster. It makes you a bad actor, it makes you a bad neighbor, makes you a bad user, and it will make us angry. So just, That's the only part of the policy. The rest of the policy is just that the purge happens at the first of every month and it's 60 days. Okay, SCP, I'm going to do a demonstration of SCP. There is no exercise for SCP though, because I am assuming most of you aren't on Linux machines or Macs. SCP is just a copy utility you can use to copy data from one Linux server to another. That's it. It's just command line. I just want you to know that it exists, and I'll show you the syntax for the command. Do not run this because you aren't going to have access to the server that I am copying to. But if I'm here and I want, I'll use tester. So I can SCP test file, edu, and just do that. And that should work. All right, so SCP is just secure copy, and all this is going to do is send my text file to another server called shell that I have access to. It's going to ask me to log in. I'm going to log in. Okay, and even though you can't see it because I'm not going to show you shell, all it did is it sent that file to a different server. I'm only pointing out SCP in case you want to script, like if you have your own Linux server somewhere and you want to script like a way to offload your jobs, SCP is a perfectly valid way to do it. You can add it to a bash script, get rid of your data. Okay, and now we're getting into Globus. Globus is what we would like you to use if you were going to transfer vast amounts of data to and or from Colonial One. We are going to try and get through this, but if we can't get through it today, it is easy enough, once we get you started, to figure it out on your own. So this hardly ever goes well in this class, but Globus is based on grid FTP technology, which means it can open multiple simultaneous connections to Colonial One to transfer data to and from Colonial One. So if you need to transfer a lot of data, Globus is probably going to be faster than anything else. It's not a single thread. It can open multiple connections. It can keep track of multiple data transfers. Data can be, it's not encrypted by default, but if you want to encrypt your data transfer, you can. And it is free for you guys to use. So let's actually just dig into this really, really quick. If everybody, on whatever computer you're on, if you can open a web browser and go to globus.org. What's going to make this even more complicated is I've already logged into Globus. So everybody here, protected data support. Should look like that. Good enough. All right, here goes. Click on the login button. And it should take you to a screen. Raise your hand if it doesn't look something like this. The list may not be dropped down, but you should say login to use the Globus web app. And then it says use your existing organizational login. We are very big with trademarks. GW is not under G because that would make too much sense. It's under T because it is the George Washington University. The George Washington University. So scroll down the list till you get to GW and select GW. And then you should end up on a screen that looks kind of like this. All right, hit continue. After you hit the continue button, it should reroute you to the GW login. And again, please let me know. This seems to be going entirely too well. Based on past experience, it normally takes 20 minutes to get to this point. But you get to your GW login, go ahead and log in with your NetID and password. And you should get to use it. You may not be at this screen. You may actually. Is there a way for me to present my laptop screen? Anybody? I guess not. Hang on, I'll just do it from here. Globus.org. Again. Organization T. There we go. Continue. Okay, some of you might get here. It's the same thing. It's literally just going to be keep clicking until you hit the end. So we go here, accept, and eventually, it's going to ask you, this is what Globus would like to do with your ID. Yes, because if you answer no, you can't use Globus. So that's the trick. We've been using Globus for about 4 years now. They're solid people. We trust them. Let's go ahead and did everybody eventually end up here? Oh, good. All right. Well, that worked really well. Confusing part comes. So you're not there?
No. Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
When you finish your sign up, choose nonprofit research for education.
Did it? Sorry, what did it ask him?
Yeah, nonprofit.
Yeah. We're educational. Scott, you missed the entire Globus section. That's all right.
Just like one more question.
Okay, Monica, can you help Scott log in to just do what we just did with Globus?
I gave earlier today.
Oh, okay. All right, never mind. All right, so we are in Globus. This is the file manager for Globus. Think of Globus as like a web-based FTP client. Anybody that's used like FileZilla or anything else. The trick with Globus is we already have an endpoint for Colonial One. So if everybody types on collection, you type GW # Colonial One, you will actually see Colonial One should populate in the list. That is Colonial One. If you click on that, it will take you to your home directory in Colonial One. So everybody go ahead and click on that. Boom, like magic. I mean, this is my home directory. You should be seeing your home directory. Everybody good? All right. Here's the tricky part. And I don't have good slides for this, so I'm actually going to do this on the screen, and I just kind of like everybody to follow along, because it will depend on whether or not you're running in Windows or Mac. It's a fairly straightforward process, though. Over on the left, click on Endpoints. Okay, and an endpoint is anything you want to transfer files from or to. So Colonial One is an endpoint, and what we are going to do is we are going to create an endpoint. Like if you have a laptop with you, we're going to make your laptop an endpoint so you can transfer data back and forth. Fairly easy, administered by you. I have a couple, but you can come up here to the top right and say Create New Endpoint. Okay, and you want Globus Connect Personal, because I'm assuming nobody in here wants to pay Globus money. We'll do Globus Connect Personal, and you have to name it. Now, keep in mind, this is what's going to pop up in Globus when you're searching for your endpoint. So make it something you understand. Don't make it generic. Like I've apparently, over the past 4 years of doing this workshop, named every single endpoint My Work PC. So I have 7 endpoints named My Work PC, and I have no idea where they go to. So I'm going to actually name this Jason Lab 405 PC. This will not be a high assurance endpoint. So give it a name, and then we're going to come down here and we're going to generate the setup key. Do not close the setup key window until you've copied it. So like copy it and either remember that it's in the clipboard or copy it and paste it on a notepad or something. Your setup key is going to be unique. It's just going to be this big long number, because you are going to need this setup key to finish setting this part up. So once you've got a setup key, you download the Globus client. So I'm on Windows. If you are using one of the Windows lab machines, this is probably not going to work because because we don't have rights. Cancel. Actually, try this again. Put it someplace different. I'm only doing this because we are on lab machines and I don't have admin. So you need to point, the Globus installation, you need to point it to a folder you have write access to. So if you're using one of the lab Windows machines, just install it to the desktop folder because you have rights. Don't install it to program files. Okay, so it will install the client on Mac, Linux, Windows, whatever you want. You finish and it runs Globus. Okay, and then bingo, it's going to ask for that setup key that it gave you back here. So you have to copy and paste that setup key in there because that's actually what it uses to generate a trusted relationship between this machine and Globus. So Globus sets up a trusted relationship between your machine and Globus and Colonial One and Globus. And then when you want to transfer data, Globus connect Globus. No? All right, that's fine. Okay, so Globus is running. So I'm on a Windows machine. It's in the bottom right-hand corner. If you're on a Mac, it's going to be up there in your menu bar. It's a G. It doesn't really matter though because it just needs to be running. You just have to know that it's there. The magic will actually happen in the web interface. So does everybody now have a Globus personal endpoint installed, like with the name, the setup key? We're all good? All right, perfect. This is actually going to be way easier than I thought. So everybody go back to the file manager and click on it, and inexplicably Globus, I don't know why they do this. The file manager, it's all about file transfer, and it doesn't do you any good if you can only see one endpoint. You need to see two. So that's what this panel icon is up here. If you click on the two panels side by side, we'll get two panels. And then transfer or sync to. So see, on the left-hand side, does everybody still have Colonial One? All right, keep that there. On the right-hand side where it says transfer or sync to, click inside that box. And then the screen is going to disappear. It's incredibly frustrating. But you can click on your collections, and your collections should pop up the personal endpoint that you just created. So what you want to do is click on your personal endpoint. And so on the right side, you should have your personal endpoint. One side, we've got Colonial One. On the right side, you've got your personal endpoint. Can somebody, Marco, can you? All right, so we're all good. So I mean, this is as simple as drag and drop, or I don't really like drag and drop because it's very, very easy to make mistakes. But let's say I want to do Anaconda install on Colonial. No, that's really big. I'll do CDS log. So on the left side, I'm on GW Colonial One. I've got a file. It's only 5K. It's called CDS log, and I want to transfer it down to this machine. So if I'm looking here, I'm on Jason's Lab 405 PC. I can come down here and say start, and it will just kick it over to the endpoint on this side. So we go here, and it starts a task. Now this is one file. This isn't going to take very long, but Globus is task-oriented. So if you need to transfer 1 million files, it turns that into a task. But more importantly, if that task fails, then it picks up not at the beginning, but where it left off. It keeps track of what it's actually transferred. And the nice thing is, all of this is happening on Globus's end, so you don't have to keep you have to keep the computer on if you're transferring data to it. But if you initiate a transfer from a laptop, from a second machine to a third machine, then you can close your laptop. You don't have to be logged into this web page for this transfer to work. So you can actually, once your job is started, you can click on it, and it gives you the generic things. This was 5K, so it happened almost instantaneously. And since this is a Windows machine, I can come here, and I can come to my Documents folder, and I've got CDS log. So that's all I did. So this is a relatively trivial sample. I don't want to copy a lot of data, but if you have to copy a lot of data, this is by far the best way to do it. It respects folder structures. You don't have to script anything. You don't have to worry about it. And like I said, if it fails, like say GW's network goes down, there's a thunderstorm in Virginia or tornado hits, and the data center goes down for 3 days. Globus doesn't care. Globus, once Colonial One comes back up online, it will continue the job where it left off. So for data transfer, Globus is very, very handy. And congratulations to all of you. It's the best group we've ever had, because that hardly ever goes well. Where's my presentation? All right, so we got through. And actually, we already talked about this. This is just what's the difference between Lustre and NFS? Anybody? Where should you store data that you use to run jobs? Exactly, Luster. Where should you store data that's the result of a job? Exactly. Okay, and we make it dirt simple. If the path starts with Luster, it's on Luster. That's all you have to do to use it. Just make sure that you're copied. Actually, let's make sure everybody has access. Let's go back to the terminal. Let's do a quick exercise. There is not a slide for this, but it is very, very easy. Everybody go back to your terminal and type groups. You will probably not have as many groups as I do. Most of you should have one group, maybe two. Does anybody not have any group at all? When you run groups and hit enter, did anything come back with a blank line? All right. So the very first group is going to be your primary group. My group is C1. Some of you may be NoPi. Some of you, if you're associated with a faculty group, it'll be like your faculty advisors group. Whatever that first item is, I'd like you to do CD Luster groups, and then whatever your primary group is. So mine is C1. If your group is NoPi, make it NoPi. And then just do LS. So you can, and we can do PWD. All right, so we're in Luster groups. I'm in Luster group C1, you may be in Luster groups NoPi. Did everybody get to their group thing? Okay. Here's where it gets just a little tricky. There's also groups. Groups is on NFS. Luster groups is on Luster. So if you do CD groups and then your primary group, you do PWD, that's entirely different storage altogether. So this is NFS storage. So don't confuse Luster groups with groups. Groups is slow storage. It is there for data results. It's not necessarily there for data that you're running a job or you're using to run a job with. And then, well, I mean, we've been all over the home directories. So everybody had a primary group, and everybody successfully got into their primary group.
It says access denied.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm out of admins. Hang on. What group are you in?
Understand. Professor understands.
Which group?
Professor understands. My group name is understanding.
Yeah, you're not. So you need to enter that group, not C1. You need Luster groups.
Oh, yeah, that's the only group you have.
Yeah, C1 is my group. Your group is going to be different. So let's just get back to the slides. I'll pass that nonsense.
Oh.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, I'll be honest, I didn't think we were going to get this far, so congratulations. What we are going to do, this is at most a 10-minute exercise, probably even less because I wrote the script for you, and you're just going to copy it and edit it. We're going to submit a job to Colonial One. The basics are, this is the only part that gets complicated. There is a submit script for every job that you run, and then a submit script will actually call a command or another script inside the submit script, and we'll go over the submit script to kind of get the idea. But a submit script isn't necessarily the whole job. It's calling what's doing the work. So it's super easy. It's a 3-step. I wrote your first submit script and called it first submit script. You can copy it. It's CP, C1 workshops, workshop 1, first submit scripts. If you don't want to type that, does everybody know about tab? Okay, all right, so we all know about, so you don't have to type all that, just CP, C1 tab, Ah, lost the slide. All right, so if everybody can let me know when you're done with this, and then down at this step, because we're gonna go over the submit script. I want you to see it. We'll go over a submit script in much more detail next week when we cover Slurm in detail. but I'd like to go over, at the very least, the basics so you understand what's going to happen when we run it. I also don't want you running like somebody already did. If you run a job and you don't enter the email field correctly, then as one of the HPC admins, I get an email about it, and 20 people have done that so far. So I'm going to show you where to change your email address so I don't get those emails. C1 workshops for submit script. Take that down. Okay, so everybody down to around step 2? Are we good? Are we still typing that command, or can I get rid of the slide for a second? Okay, so if everybody's there, if you can go to your home directory, just do cd tilde, just like we've been doing all day, and we're going to do nano, and then just type like the first couple of letters of first and hit tab, and it'll spit out the rest of the word for you. And then hit enter. This is an extremely, extremely basic submit script. It's got what I consider the bare minimum of what you need for a Slurm script. And Slurm commands at the beginning of a submit script, remember before when we were in the .bashrc profile, we said these were comments, but these are arguments in a Slurm script. So this counts. So everything in here we have to fill out. So let me go over what this script is doing. We've got the shell definition at the top. You can leave that as just default bin sh for any of your submit scripts. I believe you can change it to bash if you'd like, but you can just leave it alone. SBatch time. How long do you want your job to run for? Like right now, I know that this job is going to finish very quickly, so I'm only asking for 5 minutes. I'm asking for 5 minutes of time from the cluster to run this job. That's perfectly fine. But what if you think you have a job that runs 3 days? How much time should you ask for? Well, I don't want to make it a trick question. On some queues in the cluster, you can run jobs up to 14 days. Is there any downside to asking for 14 days for all of your jobs? What's the downside?
It's going to wait till it's got a 14-day slot to put you in.
Exactly. So the trick when you're asking for time for a job is you don't need to be like perfectly accurate, but you want to be in the ballpark, because if you grossly overestimate how much time you need, then the cluster has to wait for that allocation of time to free up before it will let your job run. So if you ask for a 14-day job, general rule of thumb for the old Colonial One is if you ask for a 14-day job, you're going to wait between 10 and 14 days for that job to start. But if you only ask for a day, you might only wait 20 hours for a job to start. All of these jobs are going to run near instantaneously. You will get an email almost like 20 seconds after you run, because we're only asking for 5 minutes. The scheduler can get it in. So it doesn't, you might be inclined to say, well, I don't know how long this job's going to run, so I'm going to ask for the most time possible. And that is perfectly valid as long as you realize you're going to have to wait for that block of time to free up. That's just the nature of the scheduler. The less time you ask for, the less time you have to wait for your job to start. So that's that first line, SBatch -- time, 5 minutes. These next two lines, these are optional but extremely important. S-O testing.out. This is the output. So this is the output of the console of the job. Like this would be like if you were sitting at the computer and you ran all the commands in your job and what spit out on the screen. So define this. Like I'm calling it testing %J, which is just the job number that runs, .out. And it means it's going to create a file, testing whatever the job number is, .out, and it's going to have all that text. In this case, it's not going to have, may have one line of output because it's very short. But you want an out file, and then you also want an error file. Like some people don't define error files, but if your job fails, you can't ask us for help because we don't have anything to go back to. So even if you are like have the utmost faith in your code, go ahead and if it doesn't need an error file, it won't write one out. But you can leave them set. I would just for the first, well, not the timeline, but the first 3 lines excluding time, I would just copy those and make sure that they're at the top of every single script that you submit. This sbatch-p, and then you see def queue. That's the default queue. That's the queue we want to run it on, and then you'll see -n, or capital N1. Now, capital N is node. It's capital letters, because node means one server. So the minimum unit, or the minimum, I guess the minimum unit you can reserve in Colonial One is a server. Some clusters work by core or part of a server, but you get an entire server. So if you do, like you can't do N0, so you've got to do N1, which means that your job is going to take up an entire server while it's running, even if it doesn't need an entire server, because it's the minimum you can ask for. So that's that. We will actually go into all of the different queues next week, just telling you what that is. This is the line I need all of you to edit, because if you don't, I'm going to get spammed for the rest of the weekend. sbatch mail user equals, see where it says net ID? Please put your net ID in there. If you put an invalid email, I get an email. If you put my email, I get an email. If you put your email, you get the email, which is what we want. So please fix this line. And we're going to say sbatch mail type all. What I would suggest as if you start running a lot of jobs on Colonial One is to set up a Gmail filter. Slurm jobs are all tagged all identically. It's very, very easy to set up a filter because Slurm can spam you, but again, we'll go over different mail types next week, but you really want all. Because if something goes wrong with the job, it'll send you an email. If the job fails, it'll send you an email. If the job runs out of time, it will send you an email. And so you can check your email and find out why your job didn't work. You don't have to log into the machine. Sure.
Does the email have to be at gwu.edu?
That is an excellent question. I don't think so, but I don't know. You know what? Try it, and I'll let you know. Yeah, that is a good question, because the mail server is actually internal to Colonial One, and I don't know if we have relaying turned on or off. Try it. Maybe not, though, because honestly, this mail server is only available, it's coming directly from Slurm, so I would think it wouldn't matter. And then mail type all, at least until you get a handle on what your jobs are and you're running. And so just for this instance, and this is only for today because we wanted the short script, we're just going to run a command directly in the submit job. It's echo, this is my test file, / actually yours probably has spaces in it. Because Marco fixed the one that you copied, but I copied it before he fixed it. So this is my test. And then over here, sorry, before I erase it, over here where it says home netid test file, if I leave that as netid, does everybody know what this command is going to do? This command is just going to write, this is my test file, into a test file, ostensibly in my home directory, but this is not my home directory. This is a generic placeholder. So if we leave this line as is and we run the job, it will fail. It will error out. It'll actually write to the error file and say path not found or something. So we're going to backspace over netid and put in whatever your netid is. So this is my netid. What if you put somebody else's netid? Will it work? No, because you can't write to other people's home directories. You could pick a directory at random that you don't have rights for. So if everybody just make sure it looks kind of like that, we will Control-O and save it. Control X. And then this is going to be kind of hard, but then we're going to type sbatch and first. Okay, so sbatch is going to take that submit script. All this command does is it takes that submit script and kicks it up to Slurm. It puts it in the scheduler and says, I want this in the queue to run. Most of these should run pretty quick. And then it actually, once you've submitted it, it gives you the job number, 305750. Oh, I should have done that from a different directory. Hang on a second. Written out yet. SQ. No, I don't have enough priority to run my own job. All right, so I'm going to have to wait because I've been running jobs on Colonial One all day. And we will go over this next week. But the more jobs you run, the lower your priority goes. So one person can't hog the entire cluster. And I know, hang on, here, I'll clear it so you can see it. I know it's hard to see, but so these are the two jobs on def queue right up there at the top. I got 3507750. It is not running, it's pending. It's in the pending state. And priority, it's because I don't have enough priority to run this job on the default queue. If any of you, if you just run the SQ, oh good Lord, that's not gonna work. I think for regular users, and correct me if I'm wrong, can everybody just type SQEUE, and hit enter, and let me know if you get a big long list or if you only get your job.
Just one.
Just one? Okay. And some of you may get nothing. If you get nothing, then that means your job already ran. So now I'm stuck because I can't show you the results of the job until I actually have priority. So I'm going to do something not good. I'm going to cheat. Why not? Nano first. Okay, so we haven't gone over queues, but I'm going to point this to a queue that I know is empty. Really?
Oh, unless you just took it.
No. Damn it. All right. Well, I can't find an empty queue either. All right. My jobs won't run. Hang on. I think I ran it earlier. I feel bad. For the people who've run SQ and there's nothing there, if you look in the directory that you submitted the job from, did you get an out file?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you can look at the out file, and you should also have a file in your home directory, whatever we called it. Oh, all right. Thank you. Terrence is helping me cheat better. I'm going to submit it to the secret queue. I'd like to tell you guys you could do the same thing, but you cannot. I don't know. I give up, Terrence. It won't run. Yes?
It worked.
Yours worked?
The Gmail worked.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, perfect. All right. So now we know for future reference. In the submit script, if you don't feel like sending an email to your GW address, apparently it will work with any email address as long as it's valid. So that's fine. I think I'm going to get stuck since I don't have priority. Slurm, just by way of explanation, it's a rolling exponential 14-day period that your priority is compiled against. So if you abuse the cluster for 1 day, you want to wait for your priority to get back up, you've effectively got it. You have to ignore it for 2 weeks. You can still continue to run jobs, and it will run jobs if resources free up, but it's going to bump other people in line in front of you. Yes?
If you lowered the time in the submission to 5 seconds, we can try it.
We can try it. I don't think so. I mean, it may if it finds an empty queue, but first submit script. The problem is when you get a priority, it's literally it's taking. It has convoluted rules about priority, but here, let's break it down to a minute.
Is that if you're running jobs that are immediately failing, so you keep doing that, your priorities just go down, right?
I'm sorry, say again?
Like if you're running jobs that are continuously failing, your priority is going down, doing that, even though it don't.
Yes, but the length of time that the job run also counts. So if your job immediately, I mean, you still take a priority hit because you've scheduled the job, but if it fails within 10 seconds, it's not going to count against you as much as if you've run a job for 14 days. So if anybody, we will talk about it a little bit next week. They call it the Slurm Fair Share Fair Tree Priority System. It was, I cannot remember the university where they came up with it, but the explanation is 135 pages long. It's a lot of math, it's a lot of assumptions, but really what it comes down to is 14 days. If you could just remember 14 days, most people don't run into a priority problem unless they need to run something like 24/7. And some people do, but we can work with you. Priority problems usually aren't that big a deal. Priority problems are apparently a big deal for me, though, because I've been taking advantage of the cluster, I guess. Oh, my secret Q1 ran, though. All right, sweet. Okay, so at least one ran. So let me clear this. Last one is LA. All right, so we've got our submit script, and then these are the error and out files. They're both 0 bytes because the echo command doesn't have any output beyond the actual output, so there's nothing to show you there. But if I go back to my home directory, it should have written whatever we called that file, test file _1. So if I do home directory, I do cat test file. I have a lot of stuff called test in my home directory, test file 1. This is my test file. Oh, the job's actually run twice. So I ran it the first time this afternoon, and it just appended more text to it. But that is the submission of a basic job. We are going to go over Slurm and more job details next week. That is the end of this workshop. If you want to play the rest of the week, like Colonial One's open, you don't even have to be on the campus network. You can SSH directly to Colonial One from home. So knock yourselves out. Yes? No, you do not need the VPN. You can SSH directly to the Colonial One login nodes from the world. That's going to change on the new cluster, but we'll have a different workshop for that. Any other questions? Was there something we didn't cover? Yeah.
I know you said we couldn't run jobs on like the login, but can we compile stuff?
Yes, that is an excellent question. Thank you. The login nodes, yes, you can compile stuff on login nodes. You can even run sample scripts on login nodes. What we don't want is moving forward, we don't want you running things on multiple cores on a login node. We don't want you using MPI on a login node, which people do. That's what locks up the login node. But yeah, if you've got a 300-page C program or a 300-page Python script, and obviously you need to troubleshoot it somewhere, that's what the login nodes are for. You know, you make sure it runs, but then and then you're like, well, I would like to run this on 100 nodes. Well, don't run it on all the cores on the login node. Actually schedule a job. So that was an excellent question. Yeah, you can run test programs. You can compile jobs on the login nodes. Terrence, what else do people use login nodes for? Almost everything under the sun. Just don't run MPI jobs. The login nodes are also for this cluster. There are data transfer nodes. That's where Globus exchanges information, but you can also SCP directly to them. It's your interface to the world. So feel free to use it. We will let you know. Like if you always get a warning. It's not like we're going to boot you unless you brought down the entire cluster, and we absolutely have to.
Yeah.
It's the only time. Any other questions? All right, so next week is Slurm. We will go into much greater detail about how to submit jobs, how to submit jobs to like more than one node, things to watch out for. Then we're going to do virtual environments, and this should be of particular interest to anybody that needs to run Python jobs with your own packages or packages you don't want to wait for us to install. You can install your own Python environment in your home directory and then start installing modules into that, and you don't have to go through us at all. And we will also cover the same thing for R, although with R it's trivially simple, and then we will go over some simple bash scripting examples and simple like bash scripting, how to launch a job, how to launch a Python job with a job submission. Yes?
Were you going to go over how to do like batch and stuff? Like submitting batch jobs and stuff?
What do you mean by batch jobs?
Like running things in like parallel or submitting like a bunch of jobs at once or...
If Glenn is here, sure. Because Glenn actually is really, really good because you can use, I know you can use Slurm to automate job submission, and he can go over that. I will ask him. We didn't have it explicitly on the agenda, but it is something that he talks about, so I can add it as a bullet point and we can address it. Because in Slurm I think it's called job arrays. Okay.
Yeah, that's the array.
Yeah, the job arrays. I will add a section for job arrays because the whole first hour next week is just dedicated to Slurm in detail. But we cover, if you all understood, I mean, you seem like a really good group of people. If you all understood that submit script or the first submit script, then most of the extra detail we can just kind of gloss over and get directly into job arrays. Okay? All right. I will make a note. Ta-da. Oh, I'm still getting. Yeah, 420, 425, 427, 427. Somebody ran that job without a proper email address. Job raise.
Fun. I did it before you even went through it. I was like,
You did what?
I sent it to you.
You sent what? What am I missing?
I sent you something.
Am I missing an email?
No.
What was that? The rain message?
No, like I sent you a job by accident.
Oh, okay. So did like 20 other